So today we're going to do a part 2 review of the Beatrix Inventor Expert Advisor. This video is sponsored by our free Golden Time Bomb Expert Advisor. Take your trading to the next level through automating the London breakout and the opening range breakout. Click the link in the description to download the EA completely for free. So I made a review of this bot around 4 months ago, and at this time it had yet to hit the peak of the MT5 marketplace, but was on a pretty strong upward trajectory. At the time, my thought was that there's clearly something heavily manipulated about this bot, simply because if you looked at the signal, which was a well trade signal, and as we all know, if you've been in the market for a while, that well trade tends to be the most sketchy broker, which is almost famous for giving manipulated live accounts to developers. And looking at the signal here in my old video, I could see that it had such a massively high win rate, or close to a 94% win rate, with a positive risk reward. And just from basic statistics and through the properties of edge over randomness, it's effectively impossible to get that. Saying that I can get a 90+% win rate with a positive risk reward is essentially impossible, right? Because if you had that real edge, you would just have a pure money printing machine. The actual expected value there is so incredibly high that my alarm bells were going off. And at the time, there was a lot of hype around this bot, and people were really interested in it. And people were saying, oh, no, it's completely true, must be something right. And frankly, you can't necessarily dispute math, right? And unless this guy developed the most complex or exceptional algorithm, in my opinion, it seemed way too good to be true. And lo and behold, if we go to some of the comments, some people were getting a little bit upset with me, saying that, oh, you have a personal grudge against the guy. And I have absolutely nothing against anybody. It was more just there's clearly something off here, just because the statistical properties seem a bit odd. And lo and behold, since then, there was kind of a few things that happened. First of all, it became incredibly popular. There was a few months where it was doing super duper well. And this was really during that massive rally on gold. And as soon as gold started to kind of pull back and have kind of a falling, I can actually pull up a chart to make it a bit easier to see. We can pull up a chart here. During this super bullish period for gold, this type of strategy where you were effectively using a massive stop loss could work rather well, just because of the fact that as long as you never actually hit your stop loss and just goes up and up and up and up, you could theoretically have a relatively high win rate, despite the fact that I don't think the risk reward would have been that in the long term. So despite that your expected value would have been negative or by no means awesome, because you were essentially capitalizing on a short period of market price action during a very strong trend, you could use that to make significant amounts of profit. But then as soon as kind of the winds started to change and we entered more of a choppy period on gold, this type of strategy, just using an enormous stop loss and tight take profits, started to come back to bite the bot, right? And it was no longer being overfit for the given price action. So what eventually happened was that they were essentially overfitting to a very strong trending period, and then as soon as that regime kind of changed, things went sideways pretty quickly. And we can see that here effectively, very quickly the reviews started to go down. People were saying, oh no, the bot is horrible, and almost overnight the sentiment of the marketplace shifted from this thing's the holy grail to this thing is horrible, it's a scam, blah, blah, blah. And people kind of changed their opinion on a whim. And you can't really blame people here either, but I think it once again shows that you have to be a bit more critical when assessing a bot, right? There's different tricks that one can use in order to make something appear profitable, but you really have to try and ascertain if there is a long-term edge that can be seen. And this trick, in my understanding, was overfitting to a certain price action regime as well as enormous stop losses. And the main kind of huge red flags, if you look at a signal, and you guys can check out my previous video on this with the whiteboard, if you see a super high win rate, you should expect to see an inverted risk reward. Because if you're able to have a super tight take profit to stop loss ratio, then generally speaking, your win rate will converge to a super high value. But if you see kind of both of them being correlated together, so a super high win rate and a not super high risk reward, but a reasonably high risk reward, your alarm bell should go off. At the same time here, there was not really too much of a very strong, discernible strategy, and that was also a little bit concerning to me. So just some factors like that, when people ascertain a bot or when people evaluate a bot, they need to be a little bit more critical. But alas, it's your money. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, it was just an interesting experiment here, seeing that kind of how the entire hype of the marketplace could go up or down. So kind of to my second review, I once again believe that this bot is nothing special. Perhaps if gold enters another trending period based on political instability, we will see it do well again, and then effectively people might become once again happier in its results and the reviews might go up. But ultimately, a bot needs to have a positive expected value across a variety of regimes. So if something was not developed properly or was overfit to a certain type of data, you won't have super long-term consistent performance just because you're really cherry-picking certain regimes and using some non-best practices like an enormous stop loss, which might give you kind of a short-term sugar high, but won't actually lead to long-term consistent risk-managed profits. And if we go to the live signal here, we can see that to date, since then, he started a few new signals and people have said good things. This one in particular has been started in IC markets, and it appears that it's now starting to be a bit more stable once again. So ultimately that means that perhaps at the underlying strategy being used, there is something there. But once again, it is so susceptible to losers that there is a significant risk that if the market regime changes, or the distribution of trades changes, that you can have some pretty bad losers. So like here, for instance, we can see that this is just one stop loss and it's wiping out a significant percentage of profits. And also here, now if we look at the signal page, this is becoming a little bit more legitimate, right? In the original well trade signal, like this was blatantly manipulated. Whereas if we go here now, we can see that once again, the risk reward is very high, but it's not as high as the well trade signal. It went from 90-something% to 80-something%. And we're seeing an inverted risk reward. So this is more what you should expect to see in the event of this type of more scalping style bot, which uses a larger stop loss. So that's just one thing to keep in mind here, guys. Not to go too much into detail, it's still not an amazing bot, but this is more what you kind of expect to see, not this, where you have 90-something% win rates and a super reasonably positive risk reward. So once again, it shows that when evaluating bots, just be a bit careful, look to see why is it performing like this? Does this signal make sense? Does this edge I'm seeing in the backtest make sense? And just be able to kind of critically assess that. So I don't think this bot is something I would buy. It seems to be still a bit too expensive for what it is. However, let's see if it recovers. Maybe it will have a wonderful recovery and once again go back to the top of the, or even more to the top of the MQL5 marketplace. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Leave me a comment. Maybe it can be a bad comment like on my previous Beatrix videos where people were passionately defending the bot, or it can be a good comment, whatever you prefer. And I will see you in the next video.